just found out that 59% of you have not subscribed. So if you could, just click that button real quick. You in Jersey City? Use this code. Save on some weed, baby. Welcome to Coffee and Cannabis. I'm your host, Dr. Beast, and this is my co-host, Gretchen Gailey, hailing all the way from Washington, D.C.
Hello.
Now, you know, we always go to a local coffee shop, and today is like no other, except we moved to another state, and this state just so happens to be Gretchen's home.
I love Pennsylvania. Everyone knows how much I love Pennsylvania, and so I'm very happy for us to be here. Even though we're on the other side of the state, we'll take it. We are at Plant and People here in West Philadelphia, and as you know, we also love to support Black women-owned businesses, and so we're very proud. And the owners, Sharon Perry Thomas and Amma Thomas, her daughter, are welcomed us with open arms and have been regulars on the cannabis scene as well. I've done some lobby days with Sharon, and so very thrilled to be here, and we're thrilled to be here with our guest today.
And our guest is none other than Senator Sharif Street. Please give it up. Senator, thank you for coming. Please, you have anything to share?
I'm excited to be here too. Thank you. You got on green. It's the Eagles opener. We're surrounded by green with Plant and People. We're talking about cannabis, which is also green, on the day that we have the home opener for the world's greatest football team, the Philadelphia Eagles.
And I would like to disclose before we go any further, even though I'm wearing blue, I am not supporting the Cowboys.
Yes.
I'm a loyal Steelers fan, but I will support the Eagles being a Pennsylvanian.
Right. Yeah, and I too actually am a Steelers fan by way of my wife, who is a diehard. So I'm a Giants fan, but I come over to the other side every once in a while. However, I did know that you are an Eagles fan and that we are obviously in where you represent.
Yeah.
So dress the part. How has the campaign trail been going? Please, we're eager to know, and congratulations, by the way.
Campaign trail's been going well. A lot of enthusiasm. A lot of people are excited about the cannabis legislation, but people are concerned about what's going on with Medicaid cuts and reversing that. People are concerned about people just speaking up and doing what's right, and people want somebody who has the experience to not only fight for democratic values, but also work with everybody to get things done.
Yeah. I think that that's really critical, and that's actually why we do this podcast. You know, Gretchen is a Republican. I am sometimes shamefully sad to say a Democrat in this particular environment. But, you know, I want everyone to be able to go back to the days where we used to work together. I did 10 years in the military. Mm-hmm. I served with Republicans and Democrats, and they all had to have my six. So I love that that's really the values that you're bringing back. Can you tell us more about this bill? Because I know that we're getting really close, or at least people say we are.
Well, one, thank you for your service. We appreciate that. And look, the bill is one, it's bipartisan bill. It's bicameral. So unlike some folks who want to trot out that, you know, they're for cannabis legalization, but in Pennsylvania, for folks who are watching me from other places, we have our House is controlled by the Democrats by a 1-vote margin. Our Senate is controlled by the Republicans by only a 2-vote margin. And we have a Democratic governor, a Republican attorney general, whereas we have one Republican U.S. senator, one Democratic U.S. senator. We are the most split down the middle state in America.
Right.
And so you can't effectively get anything done here without people from both sides. Hence why we don't have a budget right now, because we can't agree. Cannabis is an area where I do think there's broad-based agreement. Look, we agree in print. We agree that. And by the way, I've been working with Senator Laughlin, who's a Republican from Erie. I'm a Democrat from Philly. We're literally opposite ends of the state, but on this issue, we agree. Look, we need to make sure that we have a free market system where people can participate, and a system that not only welcomes in large companies investing, but also gives a chance for small guys. Right. We want to make sure we have a system where we have social equity licenses, and we make sure we create opportunity for those communities that were targeted and hit hard by the war on cannabis. We want to make sure that we expunge and seal the records of all the people who have cannabis convictions. It doesn't seem right that the government's literally giving out licenses for people to profit while other people's lives are hinged on it. And so we have a pretty decent framework, and we want to make sure we have a system where people are actually actively participating in the legal market, because by having people not participate in the black market will make it harder for kids to get cannabis, because it is an adult use bill. Nobody is suggesting that children have it. And one of the things for opponents who are on the more conservative side, we're saying, listen, if you want to get cannabis out of the hands of kids, take it out of the black market, or the legacy market. Let's move it into a regulated market where we can grow our business. And in Pennsylvania, we're surrounded by almost every state around us already has legalized cannabis. So if you're in Philly, you just drive over to Jersey, you could buy cannabis, or to Delaware. If you're in Scranton, you could drive to New York, or you could drive to Jersey. If you're in Pittsburgh, you could drive over to Ohio. There's almost no place in parts of Pennsylvania. York, you could drive down to Maryland. Right. There's almost no place in Pennsylvania where you live where you're not pretty close to someplace else that's already legalized recreational adult use.
But it's not that simple, right? Because the framework of the bill is so important to make sure that people want to stay here, not only because it's accessible, but because it makes the most sense for their pockets. Yep. What does the bill intend to make sure happens so that, one, social equity operators are successful? We always know that undercapitalization is something that they struggle with. The tax rate, is the tax rate going to be competitive so that people are not going to Jersey simply because the taxes are less? What are some of the in-depth aspects of this foundation to make sure that it's really sustainable for this market?
Well, absolutely. We wanted to make sure that we did have a tax rate that didn't tax it so high that people that people just stay in the legacy market or go over to Jersey or Delaware or New York or Ohio or Maryland, because Pennsylvanians have lots of options. Right. We also wanted to make sure that Pennsylvanians were involved in the supply chain. So we wanted to make sure we have a spectrum of licenses, including some small licenses, micro-grow licenses. We looked to create a cannabis control board that would regulate the amount of the amount of grow, because one of the things we've seen in other states is if it's all statutorily done, it's just the legislature, just at least here, but I think most places, takes a long time to make adjustments. And sometimes you'll see places where you had oversaturation and nobody can make any money, or places where there's not enough and so the price spikes. We looked at it like you regulate an agricultural crop. Like the milk, we have a milk marketing board, and they can make adjustments to sort of keep up with the market. And we thought that was important because it is an agricultural crop and demand is going to shift. And we want to make sure that we have a structure for regulating that's nimble enough to shift with the demand.
I have quite a few questions around that, but just I love that, all parts of that, because in just last episode we were talking about how cannabis is not a fixed price commodity. And I'm from Jersey, and I'm an operator in Jersey, and one of the challenges that we have faced is the oversaturation. And by going from the lens of agriculture, how did you even really know to do that? Because another thing that we always talk about is that there's politicians that they don't understand the nuance of this industry. And one thing that I was really impressed about your background is that you serve on what seems like intentional committees, agriculture, health and human services. Have all of these helped you really garner the knowledge to be able to give this information smartly, to do this policy smartly?
Well, yeah, absolutely. My committee selection is intentional. I'm been privileged enough to work with leadership to get on the committees that I thought were best for to help me advance the agenda for the people of Pennsylvania. I would also say my dad grew up on a farm. My dad was a farmer. I grew up in the city, but having that perspective and being tied into how agriculture works has been important. And having served on the agricultural committee, you start looking at things like the milk marketing board. You start looking at how other agricultural crops are grown and regulated, and that's important because I think so many people, particularly in urban environments, only look at it as like it's a product that starts out on a shelf. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't. It starts out in the ground. Right. It starts off in being grown, and you have to think about it in that way. How much do you plant? How much do you, and so I think when you think about it like an agricultural commodity, we started looking at others, and we really did look at the milk marketing board as a model for thinking about the cannabis control board. That's
brilliant. The other piece that you said about statutorily, that's another challenge that we have in New Jersey, because the CREAM Act is so restrictive. And because legislators are not so inclined to go back and course correct or adjust as swiftly as maybe necessarily as the market is developing, you start to have those that struggle before it's adjusted.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a part of the legislative process, and that's why we have regulations. I'm a lawyer by trade. You have statutory law, you have regulatory law, and the whole purpose is that changing the law is supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be a big deal, but there are things that need to change more quickly than the law, and that's why we have a regulatory process. And so what we looked at is realized there's no way we could keep up with the market changes. Whatever we came up with in terms of like fixing how it should all work today, by the time it passed, would already be outdated.
Right.
Because that's just the way the process of moving a bill through the committee and on the floor and then the other chamber, and then they make changes and they kick it back, takes time. And so what we did realize was, look, this is a dynamic market by its very nature, and how do we create a framework that can roll with the punches and stay with the times? Now, we also, in Pennsylvania, we are rarely first to do anything, but often first to do it right. And so we had the benefit of learning from a lot of states that went before us. Right. And I will say that New Jersey's cannabis bill is modeled, at least in part, on an earlier version of some legislation that I helped craft. We're like, oh yeah, there's some things that don't work there. Because while we may have written it first, they adopted it first, and now we're going to be able to course correct for some things that went wrong there.
Thanks for that. Thank you for that. But I do like to ask understand the depth, because I did read the bill and it seemed like it mirrored a lot of Jersey, but some of these nuance aspects is what's going to make the difference.
Yeah. So actually, it's interesting. A lot of people have commented that way. Really, Jersey's bill was we introduced it first.
Fair.
They modeled after us, but because they did it first, they were kind of like a test case for us. So we get to make some adjustments and get it done right. We wrote it first, they adopted it first, and now we get to try and fix it. And particularly when Jersey's not far, you get to New Jersey in about 10 minutes from where we're sitting. And so we're able to really look at what happened. I have a lot of friends that are in the business in Jersey, and we have listened to some of the things they talked about.
Thank you for listening and for giving me all the jabs, because I feel the pain of the outcomes of this. Yeah. And this is why we do this podcast, to bring the information so that, folks know how to use these case studies to make different, obvious changes. From a social equity standpoint, there's a lot of challenges there when it comes to the funding aspect. What different from New Jersey do you intend to do there? Well, all the states, but obviously considering our conversation.
So look, I think one of the things we wanted to do, and finding the sweet spot on social equity is always hard. So we looked at a mentorship program. We looked at some social equity grants as well, and looking at a mix of those things in terms of getting it done. We also looked at some supply chain stuff, and I think hopefully in the mix of all that comes out a product that works. And then the final part is not just limited to disadvantaged communities. It's having smaller tier licenses where some of the regulatory restrictions are not as strenuous. We thought was important because ultimately, if you look at there, we looked at sort of craft beer. We have a lot of craft brewers in Pennsylvania. And we realized that by having them, one, some of them will grow and be your superstars of tomorrow. And some of them just create really interesting niches. But you had to create space for them to grow. And we wanted to do that as well.
I want to jump in here because I know, especially in the current administration, social equity is considered a dirty phrase. Yeah. And most Republicans are not on board. How are you going to get the Republicans in Pennsylvania on board with this?
So the Republicans in Pennsylvania, interestingly enough, haven't really expressed a whole lot of problems with social equity.
Okay.
That hasn't been a big challenge. There have been some that have been really concerned about reefer madness. Mm-hmm. That's been more of a challenge, sort of explaining to people that that cannabis is not going to lead to people laying in the streets with a needle in their arm.
Right.
But the idea of social equity hasn't been something that I've heard a lot of negative from legislators. I think in part because we coupled it with the idea that we're also going to have opportunities for micro growers and small lights. Pennsylvania has more small farmers than any other state in America, We don't have more we don't have more acres of farmland, but we have more people farming. And I think so being intentional about looking out for small farmers, coupled with making sure we looked out for, we had social equity programs, I think created an atmosphere where people were interested in looking out for the little guy, whether the little guy was a small farmer, and those small farmers tended to be more rural and Republican, or some of the social equity license holders, which are likely to be more in urban areas.
If social equity isn't the hang-up for Republicans, then what is?
There are Republicans who are, I would say, probably more religiously conservative. We have a big Bible Belt in Pennsylvania, and those folks are concerned that this is sin, and we're expanding sin.
How do you?
That's a real thing in Pennsylvania.
I'm from here. I get it. But how do you combat that argument?
Well,
can you bring up the medical market and how well that is done for patients?
Well, they like that. That does help. But the bigger thing for them is we're saying, well, we're going to reduce sin, right? Because it is more sinful that children get it, and so if we have a regulated market, the regulated businesses won't be selling to kids, and a lot of people in the legacy market do. We found that to be a compelling argument. Also, the money there'll be the product will be pure. You won't be able to lace cannabis with other things, and it'll be safer for people who are indulging, which means while using cannabis, many of them would find it sinful, using cannabis laced with fentanyl is more sinful. And so we are reducing sin, and therefore we are making people less likely to do bad things.
Are these serious conversations you're having?
Yes, these are real conversations with real members, and these are the kinds of things that they happen off camera. These are not people who are even like doing this for pandering. These are like private conversations. So we've had conversations, and we're explaining, like, in the end, we don't live in a perfect world, but we can reduce the amount of bad that's in the world.
And are these the same folks that are concerned with the skill games here in Pennsylvania?
So skill games get attacked from two sides, but there are, in the Republican caucus, many of the same people who are saying that is also sinful, and we should not be profiting off of sin there either.
Isn't there casinos here?
Yeah, we got casinos.
We expand. We have lots of casinos, and we generate more money. We're one of the top states for generating money from casinos.
Speaking of sins, how do you? I mean, you got FanDuel had to partner with y'all.
Yeah.
A gambling site to get your buses running in Philly for the Eagles game. Does that make any sense to these guys?
It makes no sense. We need to pass a budget. We need to be able to fund mass transit. They're probably praying for all the people who cooperated with FanDuel and not really happy about that. We do have a very religiously conservative.
Do you think that'll help get the religious guys off the fence on passing a budget?
I don't know.
Look how much sin y'all have had to turn to in Philly to just go to a football game.
Well, I think some of them think there's too much sin in Philly to begin with, but I will tell you that I think that they understand that we got to pass a budget because the people of Pennsylvania need us to have a budget for mass transit, for schools, for so many hospitals, daycare centers.
Now, the governor has been out there loud and very vocal and supportive of having cannabis in his budget.
Absolutely.
Is that the only way cannabis gets done? Because I would be concerned that, all right, everyone's like, oh, shoot, we can't get to a football game. Now we got to pass a budget, and all of a sudden cannabis gets left out.
No, I think the budget, the fact that we're having budget challenges are probably going to make it more likely that cannabis gets done.
Okay.
Because many of those folks who don't like sin also don't like taxes. And if we had to raise taxes on non-sinful things, that probably is also problematic. So if you're going to tax somebody, at least tax the bad people. That's probably how they would look at it. So I think it makes it more likely. It doesn't mean it's going to get done at this moment, but I think it increases the propensity. And I think the other thing around the whole thing is that people know that, let's be real, people already are using cannabis. We're not like bringing in a thing that nobody ever heard of or has no access to. Right. Again, you can just legally go to a store anywhere around Pennsylvania, and there are plenty of places in Pennsylvania where you can get it. So I think that the budget situation makes it more likely. What we have suggested is what we're really doing is shifting revenue away from our sister states.
Right. Yeah. You're losing a ton.
Yeah, we are.
it just boggles my mind. And I've lived here forever, and I, understand, Pennsylvania's concern with sins.
Remember, in Pennsylvania, we still are the only state where the government, we have the strictest alcohol laws in America.
I know.
So,
Yeah,
you
that
buy
is
a
very
six-pack
true.
in a grocery store till a few years ago. It's insane.
and then they have to have a separate cashier. It's got to be roped off in a separate area with a separate security guard. We went through a whole lot about that. It was a big deal. Many people were very upset about that we were introducing sin in the grocery stores, which are supposed to be a non-sinful place. They were very upset about that.
For the viewers that don't know, can you just give a brief explanation on, because I came over here one time and I was going to visit my mentor and I went to go buy her a bottle of wine, and I go and I'm like, oh, a beer place. All right, cool. And I run in there and they're like, we only have beer. And I'm like, it's a liquor store. They're like, no, it's a beer store. And I'm like, where's the wine bottles? They're like, the wine store. And I'm like, the wine? What's going on?
So in Pennsylvania, we have a Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board. The only place you can get hard liquor is at a liquor control board, state-owned, a state establishment, and they're regulated. The state, you have to ask the government vets what liquor can be sold in the state. There's literally a panel of people that will decide whether or not we allow certain wines or vodkas or all to be sold. If the state doesn't agree, it cannot be sold here at all. If the state does agree, then it can be sold only in a store by the state, and then the state will sell it to the public. Beer is allowed to be sold at licensed beer establishments that are also regulated by the state, and we make decisions about that. So when you're talking about cannabis in Pennsylvania, you do have to realize the backdrop. But Pennsylvania isn't 100% comfortable with alcohol.
Right. And is that where the model for the thought about it for cannabis?
So the Cannabis Control Board, there's a lot of problems with our Liquor Control Board, and so we wanted to get it right, and that's why we looked at the Milk Marketing Board, which was more functional. There are a lot of challenges. There was a proposal to have the government sell the cannabis. That proposal went down in flames, but it had a lot of challenges. There were some other good things in that bill around small businesses and diversity and supply chain, but the part about the government selling it was not something that we wanted to go down that road again. So, but yeah, that was a real consideration that Pennsylvania itself would be the only distributor of cannabis.
Yeah, I mean, then equity really goes out the window.
Well, yeah. Well, it would. And some people said it would be equal. There would be no chance for white people. There would be no chance for black people.
I guess that's one way to look at equality.
When it comes to appeasing the lawmakers are very concerned with sin. Does Schedule 3 get them there? If President Trump goes and reschedules cannabis to Schedule 3, would that get Pennsylvania?
I think it would help with a lot of Republicans, because for many very conservative religious Republicans, anything that President Trump does is by virtue less sinful because he did it. And so, there are, and that goes across the board. So yes, for some of those people, even if it was sinful, if he said it was okay, they would be more comfortable with it. That is true. Although I do think we'll get there whether he moves forward or not.
Do you think you'll get there this fall if he doesn't help out?
I think it's 50-50 on us getting there this fall. Also depends on whether it has to be part of a budget deal, which it may or may not be.
I was going to say just grab him by but I forgot there's a senator next to me. So, sin is measured in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
That's always a conversation that Gretchen and I bring up because, I'm a disabled veteran, and my story with cannabis is that when I was in the Navy and I had got injured, I, started to get addicted to opioids, and cannabis helped me. Really, it illuminated so many parts of my life.
Yeah, it's interesting. We found that the firefighters union, which is a pretty conservative union, has been really supportive of cannabis legalization exactly for those reasons. There are so many firefighters that have chronic back injuries and chronic injuries, and they saying using cannabis allows people to treat their injuries without the addictive principles that opioids have. Construction workers, I heard from folks in a number of construction unions that are saying, look, we think cannabis would be better than our folks who are getting hooked on opioids because they have chronic injuries. And so for in fields where people have chronic, and some of those folks don't really are reluctant to label themselves as injured. So they don't want to join a medical program because they don't want to say they're injured, because in being a firefighter or being a construction worker, there's some ego in that, and they don't want to say that they're injured or weak. And so there are people who really would be using it in a medicinal way, but are much more likely to do that in a recreational space than they are in a space where it's medicinal. This is the polar opposite of the other folks we're talking about. These are the folks who'll be happier to say, I just do this because I enjoy it, not because I have to do this in order to walk because my back is killing me, or I do this because I enjoy it, not because you know what, I was chasing the bad guy and I got hurt, or if you're a cop. So those are things. But a lot of those folks, when you talk to those unions, they really do think this is really important because it'll help their members not get addicted to opioids. So it's the exact opposite of the whole idea of a gateway drug. It's sort of a drug preventing people from getting addicted.
Yeah, it's incredible with harm reduction, and I really wish that people would see that angle, especially it's hurtful to consider it a sin and add it to a medical program. In New Jersey, the sin tax is what casinos fall under. To then put cannabis in that same category, it starts to skew the conception that people have that it is a medical a tool for people. Can you tell me more about the educational lens from not only the bill, but also just the regulatory framework that's planned, whether it's consumer education for the operators that are going to come on board, especially for the equity standpoint?
So in this space, let me tell you about some stuff we've already done. Because we've been while we haven't gotten a full-blown recreational adult use bill, Pennsylvania is one of the few places where we already have research licenses. So we have research licenses. We have several colleges and institutions that are 100% that are funded just through state. And some of them had to create subsidiaries and all so that they didn't commingle with federal funds. But we have research licenses. So we have an ongoing research program here that several of our institutions of higher education have, partnering with grower processors for the purpose of understanding and doing research, both for medical purposes, but also just understanding it, period. Because the federal government has classified as a Schedule I drug, there isn't, you can't do research on a Schedule I drug, except for I think there's one institution, I think in Mississippi in America, that's allowed to under a federal program. There's not enough research. So we have a lot of that. And that has really fostered a lot of a whole explosion of information around cannabis education, because we've had that now for several years. So because we have institutions of higher learning that are really able to really explore and research things about the plant, and about its uses, there's been a lot of there's been a just explosion of educational opportunities that I think are actually benefiting the whole country.
Well, and on the university in Mississippi side, they got Doge, so that program's no more.
Really?
Yeah, it did. I don't know if they know they doged it, but they did.
They doged the one program.
The one program got doged.
And it was in Mississippi. That was like Republican jobs. Wow. It's Mississippi.
Yeah, they didn't care. Okay. But if you ask most in the research field in cannabis, it was garbage weed anyway. So
yeah, I heard that.
They weren't big fans.
Well, Pennsylvania, we've got really good research programs. I know Temple, Penn State, and a lot of other schools are doing.
I remember when the medical program began, and a number of those research programs were built, and everyone was very concerned about everyone losing federal money, and Pennsylvania was just like, suck it, we're going to do research, and nobody came after y'all.
Well, we had to jump through a lot of things to get there, but we did it in state-sanctioned institutions, and ultimately states do have rights, and we figured out how to get it done.
Yeah. One thing that I find is very concerning for a lot of folks in the space, when you have a good medical market, Pennsylvania has a very robust medical market, over 800,000 actual registered patients here in Pennsylvania for cannabis, gets cannibalized when it becomes an adult use market, and the research, the tax breaks for patients, all that goes away, and then people don't feel like it's just that works.
We're going to lower the tax burden for cannabis patients.
Okay.
When we move forward with the recreational adult use bill, because of that, because we saw that in other places, and so we've actually, the tax burden, cannabis will become less expensive. Medical cannabis will become less expensive, at least in theory, once we pass a recreational adult use bill, because we will reduce the tax on that and subsidize it by increasing the tax on recreational folks. The other thing is we've anticipated a Homegrow component that's only available for medical patients.
Okay, interesting. I don't know any other state that's done that.
Can you tell us more about that? I've never.
Yeah, so we thought it was something that the advocates wanted. Industry people were like, cool if they want to grow themselves. So for cannabis patients, I think there's a couple of, there's a House version and a Senate version. I think it was like 6 plants per household. Per patient, you're allowed to have. So if you're a cannabis patient and you'll be allowed to grow 6 plants in your home for your personal consumption. You can't sell it or to give it away, but you can use it for personal consumption. You can have 6 plants. The idea was there are people that said, one, they are getting better medical results from they're more comfortable with their plant they grow. And 2, it's just for some people it's cheaper. And it really was no industry pushback. Industry thought, cool for those people. They didn't think that people were going to, en masse, get a license and all start growing in their home. But there was a segment of the population that was really important too, and we were able to get in the bill. Again, one of the things that did have bipartisan support, that wasn't a sticking point for anybody.
Okay.
Yeah, I love that you're listening to the advocates and really trying to have all the carve-outs that, make as many people happy as possible.
Yeah.
As we've seen other cannabis markets mature, quite often there's a lot of consolidation. MSOs come in if they're not already here, and I know in Pennsylvania there are very few independent operators right now. How does your legislation make it better for the small business owner, make it a more viable industry for them without the MSOs taking it over?
By having tiers. Okay. So we do realize that there's inevitable market conditions, have some consolidation of the macro licenses. But if you're a micro grower, the macro licenses by definition aren't going to be able to do it. And there's no incentive for a large grower to buy a micro license, because as soon as you do and you consolidate them, the value of the micro license just disappears.
Okay.
So by having micro licenses, tiered scales, there will be space for smaller business people to grow, and their regulatory framework will be different. As to exactly how many and all, we're gonna leave that to the Cannabis Control Board. We'll start off with some framework, but they'll be able to make adjustments. But the idea that you have these tiered licenses will say, look, we're gonna create space for people to essentially be, like we said, craft brewers. So maybe they develop a strain. It's interesting now. There's been some talk about how it gets to retail, because you're going to have to go through full testing to hit the retail market. So the anticipation is most of those folks will be selling up to either dispensaries that'll do their own testing, or they'll be selling to larger growers that have full testing. But these folks will be able to do growing on their own, and they'll have a couple of different ways to push it out. One of the things we looked at before with some of the smaller growers, there were independent growers complained that they didn't have a place to get to market. And so we looked at independent dispensaries as well.
And this is just random stuff pops into my head. Senator Fetterman used to be lieutenant governor, actually flew the cannabis flag out his window at the Capitol.
He was, when he was lieutenant governor, he was there for president of the Senate while I served in the Senate the whole time he was lieutenant governor. Have
you all turned to him at all for support in trying to help maybe spread the word and get folks more on board with this?
I think he's been a great ambassador for cannabis.
Yeah.
I don't think he's not really involved in the legislative in the weeds of the legislative process. That really isn't his thing. But he certainly is a good spokesman.
You can get him to come in, knock some heads around.
He's a great spokesman for cannabis. He's not really an in the weeds guy.
Okay. I've had conversations with Senator McCormick as well, who surprisingly I have found to be more on board with cannabis than I think folks would think. So he could also be a good support for y'all. I
think to the extent all of this has been bipartisan, we'd love to be able to say both of Pennsylvania's U.S. senators are supporting cannabis legalization. And guess what? I would love, when I'm a congressman, which hopefully will happen at the end of next year, to partner with both of them on federal legislation to deschedule.
We would love some federal legislation to deschedule. No one
Yeah.
seems to have grown up here to actually do it.
Well, I plan to introduce it as soon as I get to Congress. I do plan to do it. And look, I've got a pretty good background on cannabis now, and I think descheduling would make a lot of sense. When you have, 37 states that have some form of cannabis legalization,
Seriously.
America has spoken.
Yes.
37 out of 50 states.
Right.
And so it makes sense. The federal, and also the banking is so crazy.
Don't get her started on the
because
banking.
And I chair the Banking and Insurance Committee in the
Senator,
State Senate.
please.
But the banking stuff is so crazy, and it really makes it harder for small businesses to participate, because a small business that can't access normal capital markets, that can't go to a bank and use a loan, that can't leverage real assets that may already be encumbered by federal mortgages, it's just insane. And so descheduling, allowing at least people who are in the cannabis space to be able to do normal banking. And secondly, in Pennsylvania, you have all these people driving around in armored trucks that are designed to not look like armored trucks. They're like designed, and then they have these warehouses of money, which are designed to look like something other than that. Maybe a barn, maybe a townhouse, maybe a coffee shop from the outside, but it's just a vault of money. And the fact that we have these places randomly all over the state, it just is it is a disaster waiting to happen. Yeah. And so, and finally, we're pulling billions of dollars out of the normal economic circulatory system of the country, and it makes no sense. And so we should deschedule to at least allow all those folks into the normal banking arena.
I hear you. However,
I feel you. She hears you. I feel you.
Congress is never going to do that.
I am living the real-time issues of not having safe banking, not having capital access. It is so difficult I think the two biggest challenges of being a dispensary operator that I see is the banking component and the educational component. And the reason why I say the educational component is because the know-how of this space, I know we talked about higher level education, but can you tell me what's happening in terms of, like, in New Jersey, they created the cannabis, the CTA, the Cannabis Training Academy, and they brought operators and entrepreneurs through that cycle to help them operate anywhere in the supply chain. What is Pennsylvania going to do to be able to make sure they're successful and supportive?
Well, before I answer that, I do want to say one other thing with your point. Look, as to the Congress not doing it, I will tell you that when I'm fortunate enough, should the people of the 3rd District allow me to be a member of Congress, I intend to go to Speaker Jeffries and ask him about making that a priority for getting it done.
That's nice and all, but they don't even let us bank, so I'm not holding my breath for descheduling.
I'm just saying, at least start with banking. That's what I'm saying.
We gotta start
We'll work
somewhere.
the descheduling,
Yeah.
but I think we can at least start with free banking as a statutory means, which the first Trump administration was on again, off again, okay with. Like, I think Trump was, but then
Trump's endorsed safe banking.
Yeah, safe banking, but his depending on who's in which attorney general position, it changes as to where they were. But look, I think safe banking is something that we actually could probably get done in a bipartisan way, even with this administration. And so I think we could get safe banking done. So
Well, and honestly, I'm full disclosure, I'm not a Trumper. However,
I didn't think you were.
No.
She would
But
not be here.
he has been the most positive, which is crazy, administration for cannabis that we've seen so far. That tells you how sad
Yeah. So
we've
look,
been doing on the federal side.
I think there's a chance. I think we can get safe banking done, and I think ultimately we can get descheduling done.
Yeah.
But I think we start with safe banking. Safe banking makes total sense, and I don't really know why anybody in their right mind would be against safe banking. I know there are a lot of people in Congress that are not in their right mind, but for people that are, I think we can get safe banking done, and I think we can get bipartisan support. And so I look forward to working with people on both
I
sides.
need to introduce you to Pete Ricketts.
But,
Good luck with that.
But to your question about education, look, I think we're doing once we have a bill, the stores themselves will have to do education for the dispensaries that are towing about and we're pretty strict penalties if you're selling to kids. The testing will let people know sort of what's good cannabis, what's bad cannabis, and there's bad, like intentionally bad because people have laced it with things on the street, and then there is bad because there's just moldy cannabis and people don't know how to handle that. We've had a lot of discussions, even in our medical space, about what appropriate remediation looks like, and so we're doing a lot around even now with the medical space about educating people about how to handle it. The Department of Health is regulates it currently, and that's really not their thing. But we would shift this to a cannabis control board that is staffed by the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Agriculture is more used to going out and doing education because everything that they regulate is consumed, and therefore there needs to be education about what's safe and what's not safe. So basic food safety, if you think about it, they think about the world in that way. And so I think having a department where it thinks about the world in the space of food safety, it's going to make it that department is going to be much more proactive in terms of addressing cannabis education.
Right. In New Jersey, I think one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing from an educational standpoint is the consumers, and there not being enough public campaigns so that, I think most of the public campaigns are just don't smoke and drive, everything related to public safety in that way. But what are the difference between these shops, the licensed and unlicensed? I think the hemp market coming into the liquor stores. I know that might not be a challenge here because of the framework, but like in New Jersey now, the alcohol industry people are confused what's the difference between hemp, Delta 8. So because there's no campaigns around that.
Well, the Delta 8 stuff is everywhere because it's completely unregulated. And one of the things that we would do is close the Delta 8 loopholes at the state level with our comprehensive bill.
And how would you do that? We're going to say
it's going to Delta 8. We would say it's now subject to the same regulations as all.
Okay.
We would officially make it cannabis.
So you're not going to pick a specific cannabinoid. You're going to say if it's psychotropic,
they're all subject to where we would say they're all subject to the Cannabis Control Board's regulations. So there's no more loophole. So the guy at the gas station who's selling Delta 8 and the guy down the street who's in his basement growing it or producing it, they're illegal because they don't have a license. They would need a cannabis license. They would need to go through the testing that every other cannabis does. If you can't, the medical dispensaries are going to have to be licensed. They're going to have to go through testing. Mm-hmm. The recreational ones will, and we'll say, look, you can't do this. Just like you can't have a speakeasy and grow and brew alcohol in your bathtub and then pour it in old bottles and sell it. That's illegal because there's a whole licensing process for the sale of alcohol. We're going to say the same thing to that. And you can't say, oh, well, we used a different kind of grape, so it's okay. This is not really wine. It still gets alcohol in it, but we used like green grapes instead of red grapes. That doesn't work in alcohol, but it does in cannabis. And we're going to say that's bullshit. Excuse my language, but we're going to focus on
all you want.
And just say, look, it's all going to be regulated, and it's all going to be subject to those standards. And I think if you do that, because if you say, well, we're going to say Delta 8 is, then what's somebody going to come with Delta 8.5 or Delta 10 or, and so what has to happen is you got to say all of it.
So you're going to keep those products from being shipped into the state?
We're going to say that those products are subject to the full regulations of cannabis, period.
What's the language of all of it? Like when you say all of it, because
I don't have the definition in front of me. There were a lot of people that spent a lot of time figuring out how to capture all of that. Right. And so without reading it, but the intent is that all cannabis products will be subject to our cannabis regulations. Right. The intent is to close the loophole completely. So if you want to sell it.
So if you're a hemp operator, in this state.
If you're a hemp and you're using hemp to.
And you're creating Delta 8, Delta 9.
If you're creating a CBD product that's not psychotropic, then it's fine.
But who's testing it to figure out if it is psychotropic?
Right now in Pennsylvania, the Department of Agriculture tests it for hemp, and the Department of Health tests it for cannabis. And there is a lot of challenges around the fact that it's two separate departments. We would consolidate all those operations under Cannabis Control Board, and the testing would be done by the Department of Ag exclusively.
I think the reason why we're so intrigued is because, one, not that this is a great idea, but it's something that a lot of states have had challenge doing because of the specific language. What happens is the different cannabinoids, whether it's, Delta 9 or Delta 10 or anything else that comes, there's THCV now. They just find another derivative and make products like that. Right. How can you encompass all of that in language and help the other states? Because I think that's what people can't figure out.
The states can't keep up with the science.
Yeah, right. Exactly, which is why you need to say that so what we would say is that all cannabis products are subject to the regulations of the Cannabis Control Board, and then there will be a test to determine what it is. For instance, if you were growing a plant right here, right, they test that plant. If it's below 0.3 THC,
right,
then it's hemp. If it's above 0.3 THC, it's cannabis.
Yeah.
If you have a field, you're allowed to have a couple outlier plants. But if your field, if too much of you have what's called a hot crop in,
Sure,
in hemp, then that crop is now has to be
right,
regulated as cannabis. That's existing law. What we're just saying is you won't be able to just say, okay, well, this product, when it's retailed, is a little bit different and therefore not subject to the regulations. So we've had a lot of lawyers looking at how to write the definition so that all of it is subject to the regulations.
And you're not getting pushback from the hemp industry on this?
The hemp industry has been, I think, been kind of quiet about it because this is a state that could turn around and say, you know what, all of it's evil.
Right.
And so I think they're being careful about you wouldn't defend this stuff too much because this is still Pennsylvania, a place
right,
where they could turn around. I mean, we banned wine from supermarkets. So, I mean, the hemp industry is like, you know what, we don't want to get banned, so maybe we're going to cooperate with you on figuring out how to regulate the bad actors because this is a state that literally has conversations about whether it's evil.
right.
So they're not being aggressive about defending Delta 8
Okay.
in a state that still doesn't let you buy wine in the store.
Yeah, I know.
Wine is still evil here.
I remember being a kid and like,
So-
getting ready for like Christmas or Thanksgiving. It's like, all right, we gotta go to the beer shop, gotta go to the wine store, gotta go to the liquor store. I mean, it's just crazy, like how many stops you gotta make to, have a party.
Yeah, and I will tell you, and even in urban Philadelphia, my constituents routinely believe there are too many beer delis in Philadelphia. We are constantly passing bills to limit the number of them. They're a very unpopular thing, even in urban Philadelphia. So people think there's too much access to alcohol in the city, and so it is not
Philly?
In Philly. In Philly.
I cannot believe that.
Even in Philly, people want to
that's a real
reduce.
concern.
People want to reduce the access to beer,
Wow.
Okay.
and so that's Philly. Now, every place else in the state, but even in Philadelphia, people are talking constantly about how we reduce access to stop and goes. They're saying there's a proliferation of these alcohol, and it's not good for our communities. I have voted to restrict the stop and go sales. Mm-hmm. It's a big deal, and so there is bipartisan support for doing that. The beer industry is crafty, but this is sort of a game where the General Assembly continually passes regulations to make it more restricted, not less. So I just say it all in the context of the hemp industry is like, yeah, these are people that were willing to go to war with beer.
Fair.
Yeah, I wouldn't put much past y'all.
Exactly. In a bipartisan way.
Yes.
They got Democrats on board with going to war with beer.
That's crazy. When you guys
We're a different place.
first legalized medical cannabis, you split the state up into 6 different regions.
Yes.
To make sure that there were dispensaries in every part of the state. Because as everyone says, you got Pittsburgh, you got Philly, and nothing in between. But there are people in between.
A lot of people there.
A lot of it. So are you also going to continue that on the adult use side, saying there must be this many dispensaries?
Yeah, so we are going to make sure dispensaries are spread out geographically. I don't have the exact spread of that right now, but we are going to make sure it's geographic spread. We don't want them all concentrated in just one place.
But you're not going to have limited licensing. You're not going to say that there's only this amount. You're going to have a true free market.
No, we're probably going to have some limits on licensing, but how many licenses and all that will be left to the Cannabis Control Board to determine.
And I just got to ask, because it seems like every cannabis control board that's ever been made is somebody's best friend or their nephew who has zero experience whatsoever when it comes to the cannabis industry.
No, we did say we're going to have some positions on the Cannabis Control Board where you have to be an industry expert, but not all of them.
And how do you define industry expert?
That is defined in the bill. I don't remember exactly what we define, like the industry experts are defined like. And so there are a bunch of them were really super specifically defined, and there are some of them that were more general.
Okay. All right.
Just to expand on what she said about the caps, because that's also a challenge that we have in New Jersey with the saturation. And then the bigger cities, they're obviously, trying to repair whatever had happened from the war on drugs within these opportunity zones. How do you intend to manage that sort of mass proliferation and make sure that there isn't saturation in the state?
So the idea is that we, the General Assembly, won't. We're gonna create a cannabis control board that will hopefully get that right, because the idea is whatever number we come up with as today is going to be wrong in a year. And so the idea is to create a cannabis control board with the right kind of stakeholders that can manage it. And the idea is to have some industry people, but also to have some just regular community people. And the community people might be a local pastor who's concerned about this, might be a local doctor, but might be just a neighbor who is really vocal. But we're going to definitely have some people in there who have like really specific things in the industry. And so the idea is that model will be able to adjust more quickly, and the General Assembly will have some appointments. And so the way we'll say is to the appointees, hey, you're not getting this right. If you continue to get this wrong, we're going to get rid of you. Not we're going to get rid of the regulation, because us agreeing on a regulation is going to be hard. Us agreeing on whether the people doing the regulating are doing a good job will be easier.
Right.
And so they'll be incentivized to get the regulations right, or we'll replace them.
Okay. It sounds like you guys really have thought through a lot of these pieces.
Well, we've been talking about it a long time. So if you talk about it for 10 years, you got a chance to think of a lot of things.
That's fair. And like I said, there's a lot of states around you that are a great example. In New Jersey, we have this challenge, and I just really, there's so many parts that hinge on this that, that's why I'm bringing all these pieces on it, that, the education is important, the consumers are important, the supply chain, how many, do we have enough? Like in DC, there's not enough weed.
Right.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, as a Philadelphian who's a Pennsylvania lawmaker, when we hear from people from other states, and if you were to if there's 200 people in the room from other states that want to talk to us about it, there are 150 people from New Jersey, 25 from New York, and 25 from everywhere else in America. So we hear a lot about what's going on in New Jersey. We hear decent about what's going on in New York. We hear a little bit about every place else, but we are really knowledgeable about what's going on in New Jersey, because a lot of this stuff happens here. I mean, even our capital is only a couple hours from New Jersey. So we do hear a lot from New Jersey operators. And for all the meetings that happen in Philly, where people from New Jersey can just it's 10 minutes away, there are probably 600,000-700,000 people that work in Philadelphia every day that go home to New Jersey at night. We certainly hear a lot from the operators in New Jersey. And so when you hear a lot of stuff addressing what's going on in New Jersey, it's because we're hearing from those folks.
Right.
Actually, one New Jersey operator is a former Pennsylvania lawmaker, Representative Tony Payton, who was a former Pennsylvania state representative, is a New Jersey cannabis operator. He in particular talks to us regularly about the fact that there is a problem. And since New Jersey has former Pennsylvania lawmakers that are operators, we definitely hear about it.
Now, Senator, I know our time with you is limited, but I wanted to, before we wrap things up, have you talked to us a little bit about Black Cannabis Week that's coming up here in Philadelphia?
Yeah, so we partners with DACO, the Diasporic Alliance for Cannabis Opportunities, on Black Cannabis Week. It started off Black Cannabis Day, then Black Cannabis Weekend. Now we're up to Black Cannabis Week, which is great. It's grown. We had, the first time we did it, we had 2,000 people show up. It was incredible. And I would say maybe a little more than half of the folks were Black, but there were a lot of people from every background who were just interested, particularly smaller growers, smaller people, business people that wanted to be in the business, because Black Cannabis Week tended to focus and talk about a lot of issues that smaller operators had. And so we found even small white operators were like, look, this is great, I can learn a lot. But we were also intentional about looking at some of the challenges that Black communities have had in the war on cannabis and how that's affected folks. You have people, I always tell this story. There was a guy that's a friend of mine, he's in his 40s. And I said to him, and he had a pretty successful career in telemarketing. And I was like, dude, this is really cool. You came up with this whole niche of you being at this telemarketing, you've worked for all these different firms, you're doing well. Dude, how did you come up with that? He was like, I never wanted to be a telemarketer. It's a terrible industry. He was like, but I got a cannabis conviction when I was young. It locked me out of so many other fields. No one cared in this one. Wow. And I got good at it, so I stayed. He's like, but I didn't want to be a telemarketer. I forget what he said he wanted to be. He's like, but yeah, I'm grateful that telemarketing has allowed me to do well as a career. But he still like, but when I was 19, getting stopped with a bag of weed has totally cut off. I think he might have wanted to work in medical. It cut off all opportunities in that space. Right. He's like, there's no point even getting the degrees. And so, look, he found a way, but for a lot of people, their lives are inexorably altered. And there are whole communities of people like that. And I think Black Cannabis Week tends to talk about that. We have people that come from other states, lots from New Jersey, with people that come from Florida, from Maryland, from Oregon, from California, who've come over and present. We have lawmakers from around the country that come and talk about it. And so it really has been a great opportunity for people to get information. And then there are vendors that are coming out talking their business about the different products they have. So it's been an opportunity for people to get educated. It's an opportunity for lawmakers to get educated. It's been one of the vehicles that has really informed the legislation. We have had alterations of this bill, of these various bills come out of Black Cannabis Week. And so it's great, and it's kind of fun.
Okay, so you would encourage anyone, black, white, brown,
anybody,
green,
black, white, green, to come.
show
but
up.
for black folks who are looking for a place where we are the center of the conversation and not an ancillary part of the conversation, it's definitely a good place to be.
Okay.
Senator, I will say that this state has a very robust community, and I congratulate you on that, because a lot of times the medical market is not so vibrant when it comes to the culture. It's not until there's a recreational market that's ushered in. I'll use Florida, for example. It's very sterile down there when it comes to the events and the communication and the entertainment. So thank you for not only championing the industry, but promoting these events in your city and really being a true advocate, not just a politician, but Gretchen and I say all the time, like, that's why she's asking you all those questions. She's always looking to make a cheerleader. She always is recruiting cheerleaders, but you truly are representative of that, and it's such a rarity in this industry, and we're truly, truly grateful for you.
Look, I like to think of myself as an advocate with a vote. So I got a vote on the floor, but basically we're still an advocate, because if I can't convince 26 of my colleagues in the Senate and 102 of my colleagues in the House, the State House, then we can't actually get anything done. We can't even get a bill to the governor's desk. And when I'm in Congress, hopefully keep that mantra, because I got to get 217 colleagues in the House with my vote of 218 plus 60 members of the Senate in order and then get a bill on the president's desk in order for something to happen. And so you got to have an advocate's thing, because you're just one vote, and you got to get all the other votes together.
Yep.
Speaking of advocacy, how do you want Pennsylvanians to get involved? How do we get them to help push adult use over the line?
One, I think you should call your legislator. Over 3/4 of Republicans and Democrats in every poll. Some polls have 80% of Republicans and Democrats everywhere across the state are for cannabis legalization. Tell your legislator. If your legislator is a very religious person, tell them, look, it's okay.
A big sin-fearing
This is not going to make them go to hell voting for cannabis. It, in fact, may stop a child from getting addicted. If you're a police officer, and you know that there are people who are going to get addicted, tell your friends that, tell your legislators that, look, cannabis is good for people in law enforcement. If you're a firefighter and a first responder, you're considered heroes by most of the people in the General Assembly. We know that cannabis is helpful to firefighters, tell them. And so whatever walk of life you're in, nurses, doctors, teachers, we need you to speak up. And you're telling pollsters, you're telling people, your neighbors, tell your legislators it's time to end the prohibition of adult use cannabis and to get it done.
All right.
Before we close, is there anything that you want to say about your campaign or any final remarks?
Well, look, I'm always appreciative. Look, you can find if you want to make a contribution, it's Sharif Street for us, and that was a little play on words, Sharif Street for U.S. But I said, look, that's us, and the whole idea is you can't spell U.S. without us.
Right.
And for all the people who've been left out, whether you're a person who is like the Free My Weed Man campaign, who's concerned about people, look, this campaign's for you. You're part of us. If you're a person who's concerned about gun violence and you don't like the fact that a person can take a gun, buy it in Las Vegas, drive across America, and then start shooting people in New York, this campaign's for us. You're a part of us. If you're just a person that the price of everything is too damn high, this campaign, you're a part of us. And so we just want you to join the movement, help us get elected, and then look. Obviously, I make no bones about the fact that I think the president is recklessly irresponsible on most things. But I do understand, and we got to push back against that, but I understand we got to work with people to get things done from all walks of life. And so, like I've worked with Republicans on cannabis, we'll work with Republicans in Washington to get things done. But when they do crazy things, and advocate crazy things, we'll fight back on that. You got to be able to do both. You got to be able to fight for what's right and still, in the same time, work with people who just legitimately differ from you, and they're not bad people. They just got different ideas.
Right. Well, we definitely wish you the best on your campaign. Everyone, thank you for tuning in. We're getting very, very close to the closing of our season. So I hope that you loved this political effort that we had of giving you long form content and getting to know all of our candidates. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And until next